G'day to all my friends and family, and welcome to Jim's 5am Club. As you can see, I'm behind the wheel today. I've taken an RDO from work, a day off, and rather than stay home in an empty house, I've decided to go on a long drive actually, to Canberra today. To do a few drive and talks, and also to go and visit an exhibition in Canberra where they have a number of artifacts from Greece, and just to spend a day enjoying our capital city. So today's format's going to be a little bit different to other formats that I normally take. Instead of doing a walk and talk, today we're going to do a drive and talk. So it's going to be a little bit different, but I hope you can vicariously enjoy this short journey that we're going to have together, driving along the freeway here on my way to, initially I'll be on my way to Bowral, and then Goulburn, and make my way to Canberra. So I'm driving solo today. I've got plenty of time, plenty of energy, and the first vlog, the first 5am Club that I want to do today is basically talk about a topic, a tricky topic, but a topic that was recently vlogged by a monk in Greece, a monk that I follow. His name is Yeron Nectarios, and the topic of discussion is what is happening in Ukraine. So what he does is he uses Ukraine as a metaphor, as a paradigm, to help explain to us that we all have a Ukraine happening in our lives. So for those who are not aware, Ukraine and Russia are at war at the moment, with Russia invading Ukraine, and Ukraine has a president who is basically calling out to the world to come and help them. But the tricky thing is that it's a tough one, because when you get involved in other people's problems, other people's challenges, other people's issues, you end up taking responsibility and accountability for your actions, and there are always first, second and third level consequences that come our way as well. Now you look back over time, and there are lots of examples throughout history and throughout our families where there are injustices happening in the world every single day. Things that can be solved really easily, I guess, by third-party intervention. But interestingly enough, and I guess the thing that I find really troubling is that this whole Ukraine issue is no longer headline news. You know, we're 2 months into the conflict, and it's no longer a topic that people talk about at the bubblers at work. On the weekend, I celebrated Easter with my family and friends, and basically nobody brought up the topic of Ukraine, because everybody's got their own Ukraines, their own challenges in their lives that they're called to focus on and to try and solve. It's important to understand that, and realistically, at the end of the day, other people's problems end up becoming our problems. So we shouldn't turn a blind eye, and we shouldn't sweep things under the carpet and ignore them, according to Yeron Nectarios. But the important thing, according to Yeron Nectarios, is to try and solve our own Ukraines. And if everybody solved their own Ukraines, their own challenges, then the world would be a better place. So, we've just celebrated Easter. We've just come together as families and friends. But in each family, there are multiple sort of challenges and conflicts occurring all the time. There are brothers not talking to brothers. There are children not treating their parents right. There are husbands and wives at each other's throats, divorcing, separating, and not realizing that conflict that happens at the individual level ends up permeating society and permeating the social orbits that we're in. I've had quite a few friends of mine separate and divorce, and it's had an impact. It's had a direct impact, but it's also had an indirect impact on parents, siblings, children, work peers, and the community. Because conflict, to a certain extent, causes grief, causes pain, causes suffering, and it causes people to disconnect and to suffer. So the point that Yeron Nectarios is trying to make is that what is happening in the Ukraine at the moment, where they seem to be bullied and seem to be attacked, while through no provocation of themselves, is something that is happening throughout the world, throughout families, throughout corporations, throughout politics, throughout the school ground, every single day of the week. Every single day we feel that injustices, as we said before, are being done, and nobody is stepping in, and nobody really cares. I guess the most important thing that we need to learn in our lives is that nobody else is going to solve your problems. You have to solve them yourself. But before they become problems, we need to have an ability to self-examine and to be able to see these problems in advance. Years ago, I learnt something which I found very profound, and it's a saying. I don't know where the saying comes from, but I'm sure lots of people have observed this, and lots of people have thought about it over their lives. And what we're saying is that the future never presents itself unannounced. There are very few surprises that come our way in our lives. I'm not saying that none come to us as surprises, that we're not blindsided, but there are times in our lives where things happen, but they happen incrementally, and if they are addressed at that initial stage, early in the stage, if they're addressed through communication, through direct communication, through clear and direct communication, which addresses the source of the issue, then chances are that that problem may not escalate and become an issue like what's happening in Ukraine now, where the economy has plummeted by 60% or so, and the 4 or so million mothers and children who've had to flee the country, and there are people dying on both sides. I'm not saying that Ukrainians are the ones who are only dying. There are also mothers and families in Russia who are mourning the death of their sons and daughters through this conflict, which may have been avoided if it was addressed initially. I'm not saying that either side is wrong or right, because in every conflict it takes two people, it takes two parties to tango. And the thing that puzzles me is that there is nobody really asking the simple question: what could have Ukraine done better? It's interesting to note that the president of Ukraine is a non-Christian, and Ukraine is a deeply religious country, a deeply religious Greek Orthodox country, and to have a government structure, a populist government structure, come into place with a leader, a very, I guess, a powerful leader who doesn't share the Christian values and doesn't really understand the Christian relationships that happen in each household in both Ukraine and in Russia, may mean that there's a communication gap or an understanding gap that could offend, and probably has offended, the Ukrainian neighbours in terms of Russia. And there are things, many things, that could have been done to avoid conflict. I grew up in a family where my mother and father taught me that wherever possible, avoid conflict, avoid crossing swords with people. By all means communicate, by all means engage with people, but once you cross swords with somebody, something very, very ugly happens. Their egos are impacted, and you've basically got an enemy for life that you'll be dueling against. Maybe not publicly, but certainly there'll be bad blood there, which will keep raising its ugly head in an indirect way. So the author here talks about the importance of self-examination and being connected and nuanced to what's going on around you. And he talks about the importance of examining your life and examining your relationships with others, and the power of journaling and documenting your journey in order to compare and contrast and to identify potential long-term issues that can be nipped in the bud in the short term. Most people have no idea what's happening to us because they spend little time examining their lives and little time trying to understand others and how our actions impact them in a positive and a negative way. And everybody out there has fears which basically keep them within an orbit, or cause them to do things or to not do things. And sometimes, having this emotional intelligence, being able to sense what's going on around you, can save you a lot of pain and suffering, and also save your family and others in your social orbit from undergoing issues and pain. As we said, not all people are equal when it comes to negotiation. Married families, a husband marries his wife, they become a family, they become husband and wife, they have children, they have a common interest. But sometimes a husband or a wife or both may be selfish in their needs, which impacts the other party, which impacts their offspring, and causes turbulence within a relationship, which needs to be addressed, because if both parties aren't happy, if both parties aren't content, then sooner or later it's going to raise its ugly head, and it's going to cause issues. And those issues, as we said, have permeations, has first, second and third level consequences, which are unknown and unseen initially. But sooner or later, every conflict grows, develops and morphs into a similar sort of disaster, which causes lots of ongoing pain, and you get to the point where no matter what you do, you can't undo the damage that has been caused, even though it's not your fault. You need to understand that there are two parties that cause grief. Even though the media will say it's unprovocated, and one is bullying the other, and one is evil and the other is good, the reality is that something has happened over a short period of time or over a number of years that has caused bad blood, and that bad blood has not been sorted out, it hasn't been mended, concessions haven't been made. And you've got to understand that if you're a husband in a family and you've got children and your wife is unhappy with you, even though you are the breadwinner, even though that you're in a powerful position, you mustn't cut off your nose to spite your face. Because if your wife gets up and leaves and takes the children away from you, regardless of how wealthy you are, you're going to feel the pain, and it's going to impact you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, for your entire life. So sometimes you just need to be rational. Sometimes you need to be unegotistical and realise that you can cause a lot of pain to others, but you can also cause a lot of pain to yourself, to your mother, your father, your grandparents, your whole family, by not being balanced in your view. And giving up something in order to create peace. My mother always used to say to me early in the days, when every now and then, like all married couples, my wife and I would have our disagreements. She'd take me aside and say, "Son, do you want to be right, or do you want to be in love and have peace? You can't have both. If you want to be right all the time, then you're going to be in conflict all the time, and you're going to cause grief to yourself, to your parents, to your children, and to your partner and their family." So sometimes we need to back off, and even though we think we're the powerful party, even though we think that we are right, even though we're trying to protect something and someone, we need to give up something in order to save everything. So I don't know the full story about Ukraine, about Russia, about their relationship and what's caused this issue. But all I can see is that the world is slowly but surely being attracted, being sucked into this vortex, this World War III vortex, by just being there, by just being present. You know, when two people are fighting, when two brothers are fighting, you know, giving one weapons is not going to help the situation. What third parties should be doing, and what the two parties should be doing, would be sitting down around a table and negotiating and understanding what is the root issue and trying to solve it. Because as this war goes on, there are multiple losers. The Russians will lose through the sanctions. Ukraine will destroy its economy. And my experience after watching what Greece went through in World War II is that once the war with Russia ends, there are sanctions. There are what I'm trying to say. There are parties, there are bodies within the Ukraine that will end up fighting for power, fighting for an opportunity to be the rulers of Ukraine, and it will be reduced to an ugly, vicious and long civil war where brother kills brother, uncle kills grandfather, and it is an ugliness, it's a viciousness that the Greeks after World War II experienced, and it was probably the worst expression of ugliness that I as a Greek has ever seen, heard, felt, and am totally ashamed about. But it's the reality. The word that I was looking for before is that there are factions. There are factions at play who cause issues, who cause fights. There are third parties out there who are rubbing their hands at seeing Russia and Ukraine at each other's throats because there are benefits at play. There are games being played. But we need to be careful not to fuel the fire of war, because as we said, one thing leads to another, and before we know it, we could be engulfed in World War III, where our sons and daughters, our children, instead of looking forward to a beautiful, productive, family-oriented future, may be staring down the gun barrel of a war, be it nuclear war or whatever. But there are issues, and we all have issues, and we all are the source of our issues. And unless you go to the doctor, and unless you continue to go to the doctor to monitor your health, then you're not going to know that you've got an underlying health issue. And similarly, Russia, Ukraine, and each of our families have underlying issues, underlying health issues, which are spiritual, mental, physical, emotional, that need to be addressed and managed so that they don't fester and become cancerous, malignant, infect us and infect all of those around us. The author, being a monastic and being an elder, an abbot in a monastery, gives an interesting illustration where he says that all the young monks, all the people who want to come into a monastery, all enter the monastery thinking that they are good people, that they don't have any passions, and that the monastic life is a life for them. But after 2 or 3 years living in a monastery, they soon start to realise that they've been kidding themselves, as they have many faults that seem to come to the surface when trying to exclude yourself from society and be obedient to the abbot and to your fellow peers within a monastic environment. And to understand that if you don't forgive, if you're not introspective, if you're not willing to see your problems and your challenges and the fact that you're the source of all of the issues that you have in your life, then you're not going to be forgiven by others and given a free rein and an opportunity to express yourself and to be your wonderful self. The author also says that in his experience that 95%, the vast majority of people who turn up to confession have absolutely no idea what is going on in their lives and are spending their lives, all their time, avoiding reality, responsibility and accountability. And as I said before, are living in fear, and hence continue to come up with excuses and to blame others for the problems that they have in their lives because they lack self-awareness and they want to continually deflect and basically suck other people in and involve other people in their problems just to protect their ego and to muddle the waters and muddle the situation. The key word here is self-awareness, and to understand what annoys you is important, of course, but more important is, why does it annoy you? Why does it cause you grief? Why does it unsettle you? You need to answer that question. And to answer that question, you basically need to be honest with yourself and honest with those around you, and to allow the people around you to also be honest with you, to give you feedback in terms of what you're doing that may not be productive, may not be helping them, may not be helping yourself. Because at the end of the day, the problem is me. The problem is ourselves. We are the source of all of our problems. We are the Ukraine, and we need to address our own issues, starting with ourselves, then moving to the relationships, the important relationships we have in our lives, the relationship we have with our wife, the relationship we have with our parents, the relationships we have with our siblings, the relationships we have with our community, our work peers, and more importantly, the relationship that we have with our Creator, with God. So an interesting look at life from this wonderful abbot, Jeron Nectarios, when he says to us and he reminds us that we need to spend more time in self-awareness and self-analysis instead of looking at our passions and faults, or instead of ignoring our own passions and faults and looking elsewhere and projecting our own insecurities on others. We need to be addressing those one by one, day by day, and eliminating them and replacing them with more productive behaviours, beliefs, and relationships. So the bottom line is that we become problematic when we are agitated by things that are not important for our salvation. We get agitated by things that are irrelevant. In 5 years' time, or at the end of our lives, or in our afterlife, they will be completely irrelevant. So what the author here is saying is that we need to focus on the things that are salvific. We need to express and be agents of love. We need to live an orthodox Christian life, and to ensure that our homes are a Ukraine, but in the positive sense, and that we don't end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that we solve our problems through negotiation, through self-cleansing, through doing things which are not offensive to God, not offensive to others, and to bring harmony to ourselves and to our neighbours. Because at the end of the day, according to Geron Nectarios, we have two things to do in our lives. The first one is to love God with all our heart, mind, and soul. And the second is to love our neighbours and to forgive our neighbours and to love them as we love ourselves. And I hope, I pray, and I deeply want, like all of us, that God place his hand on Russia and the Ukraine for them to find a solution to express brotherly love to each other, because at the end of the day they are both Christian countries, deeply Christian countries, with a lot of Orthodox Christians, and it's sad to see brothers, Christian brothers, fighting against each other about things which may not be worth fighting about, is what I'm saying. I don't know the total story, and I don't ascribe to the belief that Russians are stupid and that Putin is evil. I just believe that there are things that could have been done better, could have been handled better by both parties, and that the future never presents itself unannounced, and there are things that need to be done to unite these Christian brothers and sisters and to create peace in the world, and not in any way, shape or form to suck the rest of the world into a third world war, which will include nuclear armaments. So take care, everybody. Wishing you well. I'm enjoying this drive and talk. It's quite refreshing. I hope you got something out of it, just like I did. For me, as you know, it's important to live, learn and pass it on. I try and be a life learner. I try and learn something new every single day, and I try through this YouTube channel, Jim's 5am Club, to articulate it and to pass it on and to document it so that future generations have access to material that is contemporary in 2021, 2022. But I feel it's timeless material that could well be used and of relevance to my children and grandchildren well after I pass away. And for me, this is my legacy. The lessons, OPE, other people's experiences that I've been able to accumulate and to build into a library for others to be able to tap into and to use at their own initiative and their own desires. It's free and it comes to you as an act of love. So take care. Happy Tuesday to everybody, and we'll chat again. Bye for now.